Hello, all of you, and I welcome again to all my dear students. We are discussing this course, British Poetry, and we have successfully completed 10 units. In the last class, we started 11th unit with the poem which has the psychological human understanding. It is talking about the complex human mind. You and me, both are human beings, but still we are sure that we don't know much about the human behavior. Maybe Robert Browning is not a psychiatrist, but the way he has written this poem, Porphyria's Lover, the excellence on the language along with the minute observation about human behavior is something which is proved through this poem, Porphyria's Lover. Robert Browning, a person born in Romantic age, wrote in Victorian age, a mixed culture of Romantic and Victorian literature, is a writer, is a must-read writer if we are moving from the Romantic age to the Victorian age. A very simple thing, if we have introduced S.T. Coleridge in our syllabus and we have introduced Alfred Lord Tennyson in our syllabus, then between these two writers, we have to introduce the writer like Robert Browning in our syllabus as well. In today's class, we will talk about a new topic. The title is Psychological Angle in Poetic Diction. This is a poem, a dramatic monologue. We have discussed about it. This is a psychological poem. We have also discussed about it. But the poetic diction, the way the poetry is written, is in itself psychological. And why, friends, this poem is popular and a must-read poem? Because this poem was written in the beginning of the Victorian age, 1836, we have discussed already. Now, when we look at this poem from the present age, 21st century, we may feel that this poem is outdated, old-fashioned. Later, there are poems like Daddy, written by a famous female poet, and many other examples of psychological insight. Maybe we have the poem by Taslima Nasreen at the back of my progress. Another excellent example of this psychological insight. But when we are reading about Robert Browning, we have to move ourselves from the 21st century to the first half of the 19th century, 1836. And if we are able to move our mind 200 years back, only then we will understand that this poem is a masterpiece of poetic diction. An excellently written poem, friends. And in today's 30 minutes lecture, we are going to discuss about the psychological angle of the poetic diction with which this poem is written. But before that, let me tell you what will be the outcome of this lecture. You would be able to discover psychological angles in poetic diction of the select poem. What are the different psychological angles? How a poem is written? What is the step-by-step development of thoughts in this poem? How the poetic diction is supporting that psychological, let's say, behavior. The psychological changes which are happening in the mind of the lover and beloved as well. Basically, in this class, we are going to talk about the chemistry between the lover and the beloved with the help of poetic diction. So, without wasting much time, let us now begin discussion on this topic, psychological angle in poetic diction. The violent climax of Porphyria's lover comes as a shock. Right in the middle of a tender moment, the speaker suddenly decides to strangle Porphyria, the woman he loves. Friends, when we start reading this poem, we see that the beloved is entering into the house of the lover. We may assume that now they are going to make love, or we may assume that now there will be, let's say, uh, emotional discussions going to happen between the lover and the beloved. But we don't know that what is going on in the mind of the lover when he decides to strangle Porphyria for, let's say, his love, the women whom he loved more than his life. We believe that it is a kind of, let's say, violent climax. It's a shock for the readers at the first time. It's a tender moment which readers cannot digest at the first time in a general reading of the poem. But Browning has something to say which can only be understood by the, let's say, critiques. Many scholars have argued that the speaker is mad. In fact, in 1842, the poem was published alongside another of Browning's poems and collectively titled Madhouse Cells. But his violence might not be all that random. Friends, when we read the, let's say, title of the poetry anthology, which was published in 1842, the title is again shocking. The title was Madhouse Cells. So there are different cells in this madhouse of the mind of Browning. And in those cells, Browning is trying to, let's say, produce these kind of psychological poems. The violence for him is not that random like for the readers. And he is using it as a, let's say, charming device in the poem. Instead, it seems he kills Porphyria for a certain set of perverse reasons. He wants to fulfill what he thinks is Porphyria's one wish, to fully surrender herself to him and to make this loving moment last forever. Friends, when lover decides to kill Porphyria, what is going on in his mind? The lover is thinking that he is fulfilling the wish of Porphyria. Maybe Porphyria wants the lover to kill her. So, he committed that murder with lot of, let's say, dedication and surrender towards Porphyria. He assumes that Porphyria has surrendered her body in the hands of the lover, and which is why he is doing an act of divinely characteristics. Told entirely from the vantage point of its twisted speaker, the speaker's positions love as a form of total submission and violence as a means of control. Friends, when we look at this poem, we feel that there is a kind of, let's say, two major human behavior traits which are visible here. The first trait is that love as a form of total submission. The beloved submits her body in the hands of the lover. So, this is a positive kind of expression of love. And another characteristic is violence as a means of control, which is a negative face of love shown through lover. He commits that violent act because he wants to control the body and soul of the beloved. The position of the lover and the beloved is clear in the poem. What they wish to do, what is the means of their control, everything is clear, and their, let's say, sides, their ideas are clear in this poem. When Porphyrias first appears, she is presented as a strong-willed woman, especially for the stodgy Victorian time period in which the poem was written. Friends, in the Victorian age, the women were portrayed as a strong willpower women. There were many female novelists and poetry writers, poetesses. And there was a trend of portraying female characters with lot of strength. We had seen the similar kind of strength in this poem. Although the beloved is killed, but the beloved is shown dominating the negative emotions of the lover. As soon as she enters the cottage, she shuts out the storm and starts a fire, reshaping the environment in which the speaker exists. Friends, just like a good wife, a good caretaker, when the beloved enters into the cottage, she shuts out the storm. Maybe she shuts the door and windows if some windows are open, and then she starts the fire, suggesting that she knows her responsibilities and she knows how to give comfort and consolation to the, let's say, this kind of disturbing mind of the lover. And while the speaker is so pale, she casts off her rain-soaked clothes as though the bad weather doesn't trouble her at all. We see that after that, when she enters into the house, she sees that the speaker is so pale, maybe because of chilly weather, coldness. She takes out her rain-soaked clothes, at the same time suggesting that the bad weather outside is not troubling her now. She even supports the speaker on her shoulder, physically propping him up. She allows the speaker or the lover to put his head on the shoulder of the beloved, suggesting that the shoulders of beloved are more strong than the lover. Moreover, her decision is come to the cottage in the first place reflects an independent streak. Friends, when we see that she alone in such a, let's say, chilly weather comes to meet the lover, the very first impression which appears into our mind is that the lady is an independent and a strong woman. She does not care much about the society, what her parents, family, or the neighbors will think. She decides to have a departing meeting, the last meeting with the lover, and she decides to meet him. Though she has been at a gay feast, she decided to get out in a storm to be with the person she loves. Maybe we can assume that the beloved is on a gay feast, a happy feast. Feast means a kind of party, a meal taking party. And she want to take meal, she want to become happy by eating dinner with her, let's say, lover in such a storm. For the speaker, this marks a kind of internal triumph. Though she has been struggling to balance what her heart desires with her pride, she had chosen to give in to passion, to throw caution to the wind. As soon as the speaker sees that the beloved has come to meet him, there is a kind of triumph, the winning emotion which comes in the mind of the lover. Although she has been struggling to balance what her heart desires with her pride, we see that the beloved is kind of a, let's say, balanced lady. What her heart desires and what her pride is suggesting, she is trying to maintain, she is trying to control her emotions. She has chosen to give up the passions, to throw caution to the wind. When, friends, the beloved closes the door and the storm is outside, it is also a symbol suggesting that she had thrown away the, let's say, the storm of passions and love from her mind. Now, inside her mind, there is a calm, there is a comfort, and no outside storm can disturb the inner self-control which this beloved has achieved. In other words, she has chosen her own desire over the social punishment that might arise from indulging in them. So we can see that beloved is a self-controlled lady now. She has chosen her desires, what she wished to do. The social punishment is not a concern of her. Especially for a woman in the 19th century England, a period in which women's sexuality and ability to engage in public life was tightly controlled. Friends, when we look at the 19th century women and we compare that image with the image of the beloved, we see her as a completely dynamic personality. In the 19th century Britain, the sexuality of women was controlled. They were not allowed to, let's say, choose their lovers. Even engaging into public life was tightly controlled. If the wife is not allowed to come out of the bedroom and to meet the guests, she cannot do that. Porphyria is presented as a willful woman with genuine agency. But friends, when we look at Porphyria, we see that this lady is a willful woman. She has that strength, that willpower, and she is the genuine agency, a genuine of her own. She is original in her approach. Once Porphyria gives into her passion, however, her status changes. She stops being an independent person. The speaker describes her as mine, fair, perfectly pure and good. But on the other hand, friends, we see that the speaker do not, let's say, accept the independent identity or the independent existence of this female. When the lover says that mine, fair, perfectly pure and good, he is trying to put her personality into the portrait which he has created. The repetition of the word mine emphasizes that Porphyria has become a passion, an object, something the speaker owns. We have, friends, that sense of male dominance in the mind of the lover. This sentence suggests that he wants to possess the beloved like an object. He do not want to love her. And by strangling her, the speaker can keep her in that pure and good state. What is that pure and good state? Which speaker wish her to, let's say, behave. After Porphyria is dead, she ceases to have the control and agency she displayed earlier in the poem. Friends, when we see that the beloved killed the Porphyria, the independent existence, the willpower, the strength of the beloved loses. The soul came out her body, and now the body is under the control of the lover. He can kiss her, he can hug her, he can take that body anywhere. Basically, he has now the control over the beloved. Instead, the opening her eyes, the speaker opens them for her. Instead of supporting the speaker's head on her shoulders, he supports her on his shoulders. Friends, in the beginning of the poem, we see that the beloved offers her shoulder to the lover so that he can keep his head there. As a support, she wanted to be in his life. But after he kills her, in a way, he takes the revenge. He opens the eyes of the beloved. He tries to give the shoulder to her, suggesting that now he has a dominance over the beloved. As a result, she cannot remove herself from his embrace. She is permanently under his control, permanently mine. So, there is a possessiveness which is achieved by the lover at the end of the poem over the triumph over the body of the beloved. By killing Porphyria, the speaker establishes control over her, takes away her agency, and turns her from an active subject into a passive object. And in his twisted mind, he has done the right thing, granted his lover's one wish to be with him forever. Friends, when we look at this poem, we see that in the beginning, the Porphyria is a alive, lively creature, beautiful, willpower, strong lady. But at the end of the poem, she is converted into a passive object. And the one wish that lover expected from her to remain with him forever is fulfilled, let's say, at the end of the poem. As Porphyria's lover ends, Porphyria now dead, the speaker sits all night in their strange embrace. So, that kind of friend's embrace, he embraces her, that embrace is visible in the poem. The speaker's power over Porphyria has become absolute and unbending. Yet, despite the speaker's violent and disturbing crime, he appears to go unpunished as he announces triumphantly in the poem's final line, and yet God has not said a word. Friends, when the poem ends, Robert Browning, through the mouth of the speaker, gives this statement, and yet God has not said a word, suggesting that maybe the speaker is not punished in that worldly life, or maybe he is not punished even after life. The soul of the speaker after death will say to God that I did what my beloved expected me to did. And there is an old statement that everything is fair in love and war. And the speaker or the lover did it for love. For the speaker, it seems this silence means that God approves of his decision to murder Porphyria, since doing so forever keeps her perfectly pure and good. So, maybe this lover is trying to justify that act. As perfectly pure and good, whatever he has done is, let's say, acceptable to God. He has not done anything wrong, anything bad, but this is something which is, let's say, committed by the order of the God. You may feel this statement as shocking, this phrase perfectly pure and good as shocking, but this is what lover thinks at that moment. He do not think that he is a murderer, but he has done something with the permission of the beloved and with the God. And given the strong sexual undertones of the poem, with its mention of bare shoulders and burning kisses, the speaker is probably thinking specifically of sexual purity here. Friends, the poem is multi-layered. When we look at the strong sexual undertone in the poem, because that sexual undertone exists in every line, we have the mention of bare shoulders or burning kisses. These phrases are taken from the poem. And we had seen that the speaker is probably thinking of sexual purity here. Maybe that sexual purity was achieved before the murder of the beloved, and in the guilt consciousness of making relationship with the beloved, lover killed her. But that is hinted by Robert Browning and not clearly explained anywhere in the poem. Maybe the lover made physical relation with the beloved after her death, with the dead body of the beloved. But even that is not mentioned anywhere in the poem. But there is that kind of sexual purity which is visible throughout the poem. Essentially, the speaker thinks that by murdering Porphyria, he prevents her from sinning. By killing Porphyria, the speaker prevents her from straying into sexual acts that might endanger her soul's status with God. Friends, this is, let's say, psychological thoughts which might be coming in the mind of the murderer, the lover. Maybe the lover is thinking that he is preventing Porphyria for committing sins of, let's say, making relationship with other men. What she is going to say then after her death to God? That she has made relationship with many men, which is why lover kills Porphyria. Now she is not going to commit that sin in this life. The speaker is preventing her from sexual acts that might endanger her soul's status with God. So, in this way, we can see that the lover is considering himself as God, the godly entity who has the right to protect the human beings from committing any kind of sin. Thus, the poem explores many psychological angles in poetic diction, like love, violence, control, sexuality, morality, and hypocrisy. Friends, these are the different, let's say, psychological aspects or the human traits, how human beings used to think, and all these, let's say, are in a balanced manner portrayed in the personality of lover and the beloved. We have love, that is very clear. We have violence also, the violent act of murder. We have control also in the behavior of the beloved. When she was, let's say, she was killed by the lover, but she did not resist to that act. We have sexuality also in the form of, let's say, these shoulders, examples of shoulders, etc. We have morality also in the poem, where the lover is trying to justify this act as a moral act, and we have the hypocrisy of the lover also, where he want to achieve the love through violence, which is not acceptable, but he thinks that it is right. I hope that you have now understood this poem as a, let's say, psychological poem, or the psychological angle with which the poetic diction is used in the poem is clear in your mind. I hope that you have, let's say, critically evaluated this poem in your mind with the different perspectives with which Robert Browning has written this poem. That is all for today. Thank you for listening.